Today is January 30th, 2024. Our reflection is entitled Rising from Despair, a Tapestry of Restoration. First reading. 2 Samuel chapter 18, verses 9 to 10, 14b, 24 to 25a, 30, and chapter 19, verse 3. Absalom unexpectedly came up against David's servants. He was mounted on a mule, and, as the mule passed under the branches of a large terebinth, his hair caught fast in the tree. He hung between heaven and earth while the mule he had been riding ran off. Someone saw this and reported to Joab that he had seen Absalom hanging from a terebinth. And taking 3 pikes in hand, he thrust for the heart of Absalom, still hanging from the tree alive. Now David was sitting between the 2 gates, and a lookout went up to the roof of the gate above the city wall, where he looked about and saw a man running all alone. The lookout shouted to inform the king, who said, "If he is alone, he has good news to report." The king said, "Step aside and remain in attendance here." So he stepped aside and remained there. When the Cushite messenger came in, he said, "Let my lord the king receive the good news that this day the Lord has taken your part, freeing you from the grasp of all who rebelled against you." But the king asked the Cushite, "Is young Absalom safe?" The Cushite replied, "May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rebel against you with evil intent be as that young man." The king was shaken, and went up to the room over the city gate to weep. He said as he wept, "My son Absalom! My son Absalom! If only I had died instead of you, Absalom, my son, my son." Joab was told that the king was weeping and mourning for Absalom, and that day's victory was turned into mourning for the whole army when they heard that the king was grieving for his son. Gospel. Mark chapter 5, verses 21 to 43. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and he stayed close to the sea. One of the synagogue officials, named Jairus, came forward. Seeing him, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, saying, "My daughter is at the point of death. Please, come lay your hands on her that she may get well and live." He went off with him, and a large crowd followed him. There was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet she was not helped but only grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." Immediately her flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Jesus, aware at once that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who has touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to him, "You see how the crowd is pressing upon you, and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. The woman, realizing what had happened to her, approached in fear and trembling. She fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be cured of your affliction." While he was still speaking, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any longer?" Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid, just have faith." He did not allow anyone to accompany him inside except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they arrived at the house of the synagogue official, he caught sight of a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. So he went in and said to them, "Why this commotion and weeping? The child is not dead but asleep." And they ridiculed him. Then he put them all out. He took along the child's father and mother and those who were with him and entered the room where the child was. He took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." The girl, a child of 12, arose immediately and walked around. At that they were utterly astounded. He gave strict orders that no one should know this and said that she should be given something to eat. The first reading paints a vivid picture of the aftermath of a tragic battle, particularly focusing on the fate of King David's rebellious son, Absalom. The grief and sorrow expressed by David upon hearing the news of Absalom's death are palpable, reflecting the profound pain of a parent who has lost a child. The narrative invites us to contemplate the complexities of love, loss, and the consequences of our actions. In the Gospel, we encounter 2 intertwined stories of healing and restoration. Jairus, a synagogue official, seeks Jesus' help for his dying daughter. Meanwhile, a woman suffering from a 12-year ailment reaches out in faith, seeking healing by touching the fringe of Jesus' cloak. Both stories highlight the transformative power of faith and Jesus' ability to bring life and restoration even in seemingly hopeless situations. As we navigate the emotions of grief and the longing for restoration in the readings, we are reminded that, in Christ, there is always hope for renewal, even in the face of the most profound losses. Today, I will reflect on the themes of loss, grief, and restoration in my own life. Like David, I may confront painful consequences of choices or circumstances beyond my control. I will seek solace in prayer, acknowledging the depth of my emotions and trusting in God's ability to bring healing. Additionally, inspired by the faith of the woman in the Gospel, I will approach Jesus with a spirit of unwavering faith, believing in His power to bring restoration to areas of my life that may seem beyond repair. If you found this video meaningful, I invite you to show your support by hitting the like, subscribe and share button, as this will help us reach more people with these reflections. Together, we can create a community that seeks wisdom and spiritual growth.